Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today it's a big one. We've got the newest project from Benson Boone, American Heart. You know, some of y'all are probably wondering why I'm even bothering to do this. It's not like before this album Benson Boone has made a single song I've liked or showcased, well, any artistic impulse I consider well executed. But that's the thing, really. Whether or not Benson Boone is authentic in the discourse has never been part of my issues with him. He's clearly trying to imitate the glam rock icons of the 1970s. A classic preening frontman without the band behind him. The over-the-top theatricality is kind of baked into that image. My issue has always been execution, because trying to press the sounds of David Bowie or Freddie Mercury or Gary Glitter into TikTok-ready nuggets through some level of Gen Z angst or irony has often led to disastrous results, which is why Beautiful Things remains one of the most screechingly terrible hit songs of the 2020s, and Mystical Magical is not too far behind. Which leads to this album, American Heart, which I fully expected to suck. I didn't really like the singles. The album art looks like a goddamn parody even before we get into the Photoshop muscle definition. It looks unnatural. It looks like something Frank Miller would jack off to. And then Benson Boone openly bragging about writing this album in 17 days, which the music press has had a field day with. And look, going for any sort of Americana theming in 2025, it's gonna look away if you're not smart with it, where I had no indication Benson Boone or his handlers had any of that sharper grasp. Thus, for the album itself, well, it's not the worst thing I've heard in 2025, but really, is that saying much if this is the state of mainstream pop we currently have? Because at its best, Benson Boone is trying to affect the throwback, synth-driven 80s Americana, think some Bruce Springsteen, that Bleachers and the Killers have made their stomping ground calling back for decades. And forget the Killers for a second, at least Jack Antonoff has had a sharp grasp on his limitations as a singer, which is where we encounter the first major issue with Benson Boone. I don't know if it's a remnant of his American Idol run, where over-singing equals quality over there, but his yelping howl with more volume than power is gonna be the make-or-break issue with this album. Now, personally, I find it excruciating because it's often so badly presented, I'm left wondering who's strangling their pet alpaca midway through a below-average 80s pastiche, and that's before we get to the falsetto. In short, I don't like it. But I'm not sure it's just him, because by the time we get to the album cut and the second half of I Wanna Be the One You Call, and the guitars that desperately need some texture or flair or muscle because that key change did not land at all, I was reminded distinctly of Kyle Craft, a throwback independent singer-songwriter who quietly made two of the best albums of the 2010s in Dolls of Highland and Full Circle Nightmare, and there was a similar sharpness to his vocal delivery, and I didn't mind his voice, which has me looking a lot more at the vocal mixing and mastering and the arrangements. It's hard to ignore that Benson Boone and his people are trying to recapture the viral magic of the very worst moment of Beautiful Things, so they're teasing out new ways to frighten the children by pushing him to the very front of the mix and to his extremes that he should not be attempting live for his own sake if he doesn't want to save his vocal cords. But if these songs had a thicker organic foundation or a credible groove, maybe it wouldn't evoke sounding gone wrong. But it's also not like we're dealing with the huge gated drums or drum machines of the 1980s, or a bass line with any textured swagger to punch up that groove, or string arrangements that sound remotely organic, or a guitar with muscle or any kind of soloing, or a synth. Actually, let's not mince words. The keyboards on this album are fucking abysmal, where I found myself tolerating some of the drippy, soft-focused pianos that call back to his debut, compared to the oily projectile vomit all over Mystical Magical or Man and Me or I Wanna Be the One You Call. The best here is probably Wanted Man because it sounds like Tainted Love by way of Spirit in the Sky, and still not saying much. The reference points really highlight how derivative and bad the song is. And because I'm not interested in being nice anymore, let's bring out the Harry Styles comparison. And while there is a slight difference in the glam rock that both men are trying to evoke, Harry Styles is aiming for an artsier, English prog-inflected tone, whereas Benson Boone, Well, he certainly has concepts of a plan in a more Americana-driven direction that could afford to discover Billy Joel any goddamn day now outside of that piano line on the closer, Young American Heart, probably the best song on the album. In execution, for as much as I ripped into Harry Styles over the years, evoking more of a pastiche than his own unique artistic impulses, at least he's competent. His producers can evoke the sense of scale. There's a vestige of charisma and poise in his theatricality. He understood the assignment. Compare Momma Song to Sign of the Times, and there is a credible gulf in quality across the board. Or at the very least, I got the impression that Harry Styles or Kyle Kraft or Jack Antonoff or Brandon Flowers of the Killers, they understood the lineage of their sound in order to reference and expand upon it well. Because now we got to get to the content and the themes of American Heart, which are, in order, I'm the hottest American boy around, citation desperately needed, my heart is still broken, but maybe you can fix it, and I really love and idolize my parents, the last probably being the most tolerable. For as much as the video for Mr. Electric Blue is trying to get in on the joke of the backlash with a sense of irony that's nowhere in his actual music, it's elevating some performatively aggressive macho figure from the past that Benson Boone wants to emulate, but can't, at least not yet. Possibly his dad, something that scares him a little bit on Momma Song, which is a track dedicated to his mother. And when you consider the whole throwback aesthetic of the album and how much he marked out bringing out Brian May at Coachella, Benson Boone clearly wants to evoke a very specific attitude of swaggering rock star, while also being sensitive enough to keep his majority female fan base. The most revealing song on this album, and an early low point for me, is Man and Me, where he talks about this toxic relationship that took away the man in him, which implicitly sets up how he approaches relationships and masculinity across this album, where for as much as he is this bad boy, the wanted man, who will crash that car as a young American who is wild and free, that makes you all swoon, clearly, he's also still the guy who will pine over your old things and dream of you when he's in Italy, imagine the romance, and then come home to try and charm you with everything that he saw in you clearly from the very start, with some of that charming cavalier dirtbag flair. I understand exactly what the marketing plan is here, especially with that flicker of irony that he doesn't really mean all the edgy stuff, which I almost might believe given how largely toothless this album is. But that's the tricky thing. So much of his preening entreaties land really sloppy and unconvincing for me because Benson Boone is just not a detailed enough writer to break free of some of his influences. He's trying to be everything to everyone and spreading himself rather thin in a very derivative, pop-accessible framework, where if what I can remember about his lyrics are his most obnoxious and gross lines and sentiments, the line between being disingenuous or being incompetent is kind of a blurry one, and either way it doesn't present this guy as remotely likable. Or do I need to read out how gross Mystical Magical is again coming off a Billboard breakdown? And truthfully, to revisit some of the conversations of Benson Boone's authenticity, I would argue American Heart kind of feels true to life and his experience, probably a bit better than the insecure, treacly mess of his debut, and honestly pretty revealing, because he and his team sound way over their heads, scrabbling to capitalize on viral momentum that would not have occurred without UMG beefing with TikTok in 2024, leaving a gap in the market for him, warts and all. American Heart is him trying to go big in order to meet that moment, but the ideas at its core are rushed, derivative, and dangerously undercooked. The production sounds really cheap overall, and the artistic development feels utterly mishandled, flailing too much to take a risk, but way too overmanaged to be allowed to fail. I mean, that at least feels authentic. And you know what? This being mediocre to bad isn't even surprising to me. Has everyone just forgotten that the majority of American Idol winners rarely have a sustained career beyond maybe one album? Benson Boone getting unprecedented luck and tangible traction, it only exposes how unprepared for this is, and that's not surprising. Yes, there are seeds of a compelling idea here. If you want to evoke throwbacks to classic rock and Americana and how they might fit with modern perceptions of masculine icons and archetypes, especially from someone like Benson Boone who's still trying to figure it all out, ironically or otherwise, there's something there. I could imagine this potentially working, but it's way too rushed, cheap, and safe to be that introspective to take that risk, and it reveals just how tenuous his star power and fame might actually be. So yeah, I'm not gonna say this is good, but if you want a snapshot of what the American music industry thinks that you will want to idolize, that this would get to the heart of all of it, and yeah, ain't nothing mystical or magical about that. I'd say skip it. Even this year. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Yeah, I know this is pretty inflammatory. I know the Benson Boone fans, you're not going to like this. Well, tough. This is the sort of thing I've been having to deal with for the past couple of years. I don't find him compelling nor interesting, especially when I have so many very obvious comparison points. And quite frankly, I feel like in some of these points, I'm being generous. But hey, leave your comments down there below. Have fun. This time I'm willing to meet that energy. Beyond that though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you want to get involved in helping support the channel, getting albums on my schedule when I reopen it in July, or hell, just yell at me on my Discord, link to Patreon and YouTube memberships right over there. Don't feel obligated. Tough times out there, I understand, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.